Aske Simon Christensen has been coding demo effects on the Amiga since 1992. And on the PC, since 2005. He has a strong fascination of size-limited demos and is one of the authors of the Crinkler compression tool, which is widely used in the demo scene for compressing 4 kilobyte intros. Professionally, he has a PhD in computer science, has worked for advanced RISC machines, building a shader compiler for the ARM Mali architecture series of GPUs, and he's currently employed in the bioinformatics industry. So have fun.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so I was looking at the program for the conference here, and I was seeing lots and lots of see what you can use all these modern, extremely fast, extremely computationally heavy GPUs for, and I thought it would be fun with a bit of perspective. So I'll be talking about what a GPU looked like 25 years ago, and it was a very different thing. So we'll see. The bulk of the presentation will be I'll have a lot of examples of demo effects that were common on the Amiga, and then sort of interspersed with this, I'll be introducing the different parts of the Amiga graphics hardware, so you can appreciate how these effects were done. So the basic the machine that we're talking about here is the Amiga 500. Introduced in 1987. It was an extremely popular home computer back then, and probably the most popular demo platform in the early 90s. And it had this 7 megahertz CPU. It's widely considered to be a 16-bit machine because this has a 16-bit data bus, and many of the special chips that it had was 16-bit, so it's very 16-bit oriented. From a programmer point of view, it's actually a 32-bit machine. The instruction set is 32-bit, so it's sort of a mix between that. Half a megabyte of memory, or 1 megabyte is usually extended to. So that's sort of the level of computational power we have. And the interesting thing about it then is these custom chips that were put in that could do special things, which I will talk about. So to do the comparison, we'll compare what is the state of the art now with back then. So if you take a modern GPU, you get something like 5 teraflops of performance, and at a common resolution like full HD resolution, 60 FPS, that amounts to something like 40,000 operations per pixel per frame. So there's a lot of computation available there. If we do the same computation for the Amiga 500, it's a 7 megahertz. The fastest instructions, fastest computations you can do, something like a 16-bit integer operation, takes 4 clock cycles. The common resolution that demos were running in is 320 by 256 at 50 FPS, or at least on the PAL Amigas in Europe. That was the common. And we do the same computation, and we see that is 0.4 operations per pixel per frame. So there are two important things to see here. One is that even if you take the resolution into account, the machines we have today are 100,000 times more powerful computational-wise. And another interesting thing is here that how can you actually do anything at all? How can you do any interesting effect with less than 1 operation per pixel per frame? And that's what we will look closer at. And one thing you can do, of course, is to not draw all pixels. So then you get dot effects, and dot effects are very popular in demos back then. So here's an example of a dot effect. And as you will see, it's also there was a lot of competition back then on who could draw the most dots, and often you see on the screen written, oh, this is this many dots, this is 12,000 dots. So another example of dot effect is here sort of sine dots. So many variations. Dot tunnel is also a classic. or dot landscape. So you can do lots of things with nice things with dot effects, but you sort of get tired of them after a while. And you can actually do more things like this because of the special hardware that the Amiga has. So let's dive into that. So first look at how the Amiga actually represents graphics. It's represented as bitplanes, which means that when you have some graphics which is displayed on screen, it's separated into multiple bitplanes, each containing 1 bit per pixel. So depending on how many bitplanes you can have multiple colors. So 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 colors. Here's the example with 5 bitplanes, so 32 colors. So for each bit, it combines all the values of the bits together. Use that value to log up into a color table. It has a table with up to 32 colors, 12-bit RGB, and then the color value there is what is output of that pixel. So that's basically how it works. And these bit planes are sort of independent. You can place them independently in memory, which is also something which is used very much in the demo effects. You can also offset these bit planes, or playfields as they're called when you combine them. So you can show just on the screen just one section of a larger image without having to move the image around in memory. It can actually have 2 at the same time. It has what is called the dual playfield mode. The even bit planes and the odd bit planes can be offset individual from each other. So that can be used in games, for instance, to have multiple layers behind each other. But it doesn't. It can also. I mean, usually when you have the dual playfield, you would have sort of one set of colors for one layer and one set of colors for the other layer. But it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, the bit planes combine in the usual way to form the colors, and that can be utilized in a demo effect like this one. So this is basically just it's 4 bit planes, so it's 2 sets of 2 bit planes moving around compared to each other, which creates this kind of interference pattern. So it's sort of using the hardware in a slightly different way from maybe what was intended, but you get a nice effect this way without doing any computation, really. I mean, you don't really have much computational power, so you have to do things differently. Another nice thing you could do is like this. You see here's some kind of directional lighting. Depending on where the light source is, you see the different facets of the text lighting up. And what you'll notice here is that there are only 4 different orientations of faces that are lit. And the way this is done is that it's just drawn in 4 different colors. And then depending on where the light should come from, it just changes the palette. So it doesn't actually change the contents of the bit planes to change the colors. It's just a sort of a palette trick. But in order to really understand the Amiga hardware, you have to think like a CRT monitor. And what I mean by that is that is, if they think about how a CRT monitor works, is drawing these scan lines one at a time, and between each, it's sort of the electron beam turns off, go to the next scan line, draws that, and so on, and at the end it turns up and goes back to the top again. So you have this vertical blanking and horizontal blanking periods in between, and the picture is not just like one picture. It's actually there's a temporal element in the way the picture is drawn. It's drawn sort of from one end to the other, which is also important in some of the demo effects we'll see. So let's look at this Playfield Offset thing in more detail, because the thing about showing one section of a larger image, that's sort of the high level view of what is going on. But what you actually have to do what you actually have to tell the hardware if you want to achieve this is much more detailed, much more low level. So what you see is here that the image which is shown, that the larger image, we have sort of separated that up into words, these 16-bit words, because everything is 16-bit oriented, so it actually has to read these whole 16-bit words at a time. So in order to be able to offset at individual pixel levels, what you do is you tell the hardware where it should start reading from memory, a bit called the Bitplane pointer, and sort of how much it should shift, how much of the first word which is visible on screen. So this is sort of a shift value, or it's actually, you can look at it as the delay is delaying the display of the pixels a bit, so you can offset it at individual pixel levels. And then at the end of each scan line, it has to skip some amount of memory onto the next line. So you have to explicitly specify at the end of each line, you need to skip this many bytes before it reads further along in the memory for the next scan line. So that's basically how you set up the screen display on the Amiga. And the modulos and the shift values, again, they are independent for the even and odd bit planes, so that you can have the dual Playfield mode with independent offsetting. And with this, you can make various tricks. For instance, if you set the modulo to a negative value, say the same size as the size of one scan line, then what happens is that it will show the same scan line over and over again throughout the whole screen, so you get an effect like this. So you could just draw one scan line and have it displayed on the whole screen. And this is another way another trick you can do with Bitplanes. As I said, the Bitplane pointers are completely independent. So here you have another dot effect, but the way it's displayed is that it actually shows it in 4 bit planes, where it shows 4 consecutive frames of the animation in these 4 different bit planes, and then sets up the color so that it looks like a motion blur. So again, it's actually only drawing one frame each. Each frame is showing, but then showing sort of 4 frames at the same time. So you get a motion blur effect. Okay, so one of the really interesting parts of the Amiga hardware is the copper. You've probably heard about that one. This is a kind of coprocessor which runs at the same time as the main CPU, but it has only 2 instructions. One instruction is the move instruction, which takes some value, some immediate value, which is embedded in the instruction, and writes that into the hardware register. And hardware register, that could be a bitplane pointer, or a modulo, or a color, or the position of the display window, or whatever. There are lots of different registers which sets up the various parts of the display. And then it has another instruction, which is wait until the electron beam has reached a particular position. And then you can then set up new values for the registers. And all these instructions are then put together in what we call a copper list, basically a list of these instructions. And that copper list is then automatically restarted at every vertical blank. So for each frame that is displayed, it will run through all these instructions. And sort of what the canonical use case for having this control of being able to wait for a particular position is being able to have some kind of split screen thing. So this is a screenshot from the Amiga system, where you see the workbench screen where you have all the icons that sort of being pulled down, and you can have another screen behind. So you have these multiple screens that can be in memory at the same time, that can run different programs, and you can actually pull down one screen and then see the other one behind. And what happens there is that there's a copper list which waits for some position in the middle of the screen and then sets up the new values for the registers. So it sets up for sort of one set of values at the top and another in the middle. And these screens have different number of colors, different horizontal resolution, so you can basically do whatever. So that was sort of the intent behind the cover, that you can have these split the screen into multiple sections like this, showing independent things. And of course, that the copper can be used for many other things. So here's a typical example. If you at each wait for each scan line, and then set the background color to something different. And then you can create nice rainbow animations. I'm just playing in. And you see that in a lot of Amiga demos, either just fixed gradients or various kinds of animations like this. And here's a sort of a bit more elaborate way. It also not only sort of changing the colors, but it's also changing the sort of the width of the graphics that's being displayed. So you can do that, for instance, by having these bars in memory in different widths, and then at each scan line you could just point the bitplane pointer to the correct one, so you get this effect of the widths differing. And this is a classical effect, the copper bars. So this one is interesting, because this is actually the same scan line, the same memory being shown all the way down. I had this example before where we just render one scan line and show it all the way down. And this is actually also what it's doing here. But while it's being displayed, it will change the contents of the memory which is being displayed. So here comes in the temporal element, that you can actually display the same memory over and over again, but with different contents. So if you synchronize the changes to the memory to the display, you can have an effect like this. So it's basically drawing more and more of these just small pieces of graphics going from red to white to yellow, and because it's then being displayed again and again downwards, you get this kind of column effect, and then some copper bars in the background as well. So here's another example of a copper trick. Again, you have this sort of graphics, which is just one bit plane alternating 0 and 1 with some block size, and it's and you have these in various scales in memory, and then at each scan line you can just select one of these scales, and you can get this wavy effect. And then at the same time, it is changing the colors, both to give this sort of the shading, making it darker and making the colors different and making the checkerboard pattern. So just having the capability of changing all these different things, colors and bitplane pointers at each scan line, you can make an interesting effect based on that. And the principle here is actually the same. It wants to show a ball at various scales, but sort of drawing the whole ball, that would be too computationally heavy. So what it has is this sort of one-line sections of the ball again stored in all the different scales, and then selecting for each scan line the sort of the correct width to make it actually circular. And here it's doing it in dual Playfield mode, so it's doing both for the even and the odd bit planes, so you can see. And you get this funny pattern, this funny shading in the ball, which is sort of a side effect from all the various balls being sort of generated from the same basic patterns. Now his is doing something a bit more sophisticated. It looks like some kind of texture mapping, right? It has this floor and ceiling where is applied this repeating texture on it. And the way this is done is that the graphics that it's showing is actually just sort of looping through the colors. So, for instance, if you look closely here, you will see that the texture is 15 pixels wide, or 15 pixels would it be. And the graphics that it's showing is just sort of looping through the colors, color 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 15, and then color 1 again. So it has just a repetition of these colors. and then you can store different scales of the graphics in memory and select the correct one for each scan line. And on top of that, it's then changing the colors. So it looks at looks into the texture and say, okay, this particular line in the texture, which colors does that contain? And it's setting all the colors to those particular values. So the result is that you get this texture mapped effect. And this is, well, basically you could say that this could in principle be done in the same way, that you could store the different scales, the different widths in memory, and just select the right one for each scan line. But since this is a full width picture, you couldn't just do this trick with changing the colors, because there are too many pixels across to fit inside the 32 color registers. And also you couldn't actually store all the scales of all the lines of the pictures, because that would be far too much memory. Remember, we have only 0.5 megabyte of memory, so that would not be a way to do it. So what is done here is a quite neat trick. Remember, I told you about the shift register, which is the register which is responsible for aligning the bitplanes to sort of individual pixel levels when you offset into a picture. What it does is it can shift the graphics that you show slightly to the right, between 15 and 0 pixels. And then somebody sat down and thought, what happens if I change the value of the shift register throughout a scan line? So it slightly increase the value of the shift register or slightly decrease the value of the shift register. And what happens is, of course, that the shift in the graphics changes. So you compress the graphics slightly or expand the graphics slightly. So that's the effect which is, or that's the trick which is used here. That sort of with careful timing with the cover, it's waiting for particular moments throughout the scan line and then setting the shift register to particular values, which creates this scaling effect. And again, we're used to a scaling effect being something that you compute. You have to interpolate through the texture and scale it in some way. Here the scaling is done sort of directly with the display hardware. Again, sort of avoiding the heavy computations. Okay, so the final piece of hardware to describe is the blitter. And the blitter is it's short for block image transfer. It is hardware which can move graphics around in memory, designed to use to draw graphics on the screen. And how it works when you sort of look at the low-level use of it is that the blitter has 3 input sources. It can read from 3 points in memory at the same time, and then 2 of them can be shifted again to create this sort of individual pixel offset. Again, the blitter is 16-bit oriented, so it can only work on 16 pixels at a time. Then for each of the bit, it combines the 3, looks up in a table, basically meaning it do an arbitrary logical combination of the inputs, and then writes that to an output. So how does this actually achieve drawing graphics? Well, if you could draw the top and the bottom edges, and this is actually what it does. It draws the top and the bottom edges, and then it fills it. But the blitter is not really meant to fill vertically. The blitter fills horizontally. So how does it fill vertically? And that uses another trick that if you actually do a normal, if you do an XOR operation with the blitter, but you actually write your result sort of one scan line ahead of the place where you read it, then you get the exact same result as the filling, just vertical instead of horizontal. Again, another trick there. So another classic effect, the plasma. And this is actually a sort of combination of multiple things. You have the cover instructions where you can set the background color. And if you just make a cover list which just says set background color, set background color, set background color, just without any weights in between, then you get, because of the speed of the cover, you get a sort of the color changed for every 8 pixels. But you can change that to anything, basically. So you basically get a sort of a low resolution display view, which can display all sort of arbitrary colors. And then you can take this display, and then you can take this cover list, and then you can draw into it using the blitter. So using the blitter, you can take this color gradient and copy that in vertically sort of into the cover list. So is combining the cover and the blitter by having the blitter right into the cover list. And then at the same time, it's also doing some offsetting horizontally by weighting at different points of the different scan lines. So this way you can sort of get it distorted in various ways. And in some of the effects you see, you sort of have alternate things on alternate scan lines. And that's again to create sort of an effect of mixing the colors more together. It's actually sort of mixing 2 plasmas into the same. So one on the even scan lines and another one on the odd scan lines, which you see in the next plasma here. There, you see sort of the horizontal stripes. So this is another traditional way of giving an impression of things blending together, just sort of drawing them alternately. And this is another kind of plasma. And if you look at this, you see there's a lot of things going on the screen. But if you look at it, you can see it's sort of having some kind of function of the x-coordinate added with some function of the y-coordinate, which that could achieve sort of a pattern like this. So we have some wavy thing in the x direction and some wavy thing in the y direction in the colors and add them together. But doing an add for each pixel is out of the question. So it has to do this in a different way. And what it does is, again, it just draws one scan line with the sort of this wavy pattern, and then it can just change the colors for each scan line, which sort of make it appear to have this color sort of shifted up and down. So that way the horizontal variation and the vertical variations are made using 2 completely different mechanisms. And this is the final effect I have to show you. So this looks like, well, basically just some cover bars until it starts rotating. And the trick here is that this is actually not one effect. This is actually multiple effects that are sort of just switching between, because when it's horizontal, it can just do it like in the cover bars way, and then when it's vertical, it can do it by just showing the same scan line again and again, and also the almost vertical, it can do it by showing the same scan line again and again, but with different shift values. So depending on the angle, it's actually completely different code paths that renders this effect, and this is some of the tricks you also had to get into to make some of these. And there's a lot of, you see that a lot in these classical effects, that people come up with effects where it's not really obvious how they're doing it. So there's a lot of creativity in this. Okay, so just for reference, is a list of demos that I was showing effects from. See, spanning a period of about 4 years. So, any questions? Yeah?
How do you wait for the vertical tracing? How do you track the tracing? The question is, how do you track the position of the CRT?
There are multiple ways to do that, actually. So as I said, the cover is automatically starting its execution at every vertical blank. So the only thing you tell the hardware about the cover list is where should it start executing at every vertical blank. So it automatically starts its execution, and the cover can then wait for specific positions using the cover wait instruction, and then set the values of hardware registers throughout the screen. There's also a vertical blank interrupt that the CPU can get. So every time the vertical blanking starts, the CPU will get interrupt and can do whatever it needs to do for that. That's often used to, for instance, play the music for the demo, or do other kinds of things, set up computations that it needs to do for this particular frame of the demo. And the third way is that there's also a hardware register which at all time contains the current raster position, which can be read by the CPU. So the CPU can also poll the raster position and wait for it, or make decisions based on that.
So if anyone else has questions, raise your hand. No? In that case... Oh, sorry.
I noticed there weren't any Looney's productions in your examples. So is that because you're extremely humble, or... I don't know. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, well, I wanted this to be a sort of a historic seminar, so I was choosing only very old productions, you say, from 93 and back. I actually made a demo in 93, but it's not really published anywhere, and it's not very good either. So I chose the demos that, well-known demos, and demos that showed a good example of the effects that I wanted to show, and the hardware features I wanted to show.
Okay, anyone else? No? In that case, Aske, thank you.